listening to NTParanormal After Dark. Nothing normal about it.
Hey, what is up, Paranerds? Welcome back for another riveting edition of watching us argue about paranormal topics. Today I got Sara Hatfield with me in the studio, which is great since nobody likes me.
Especially me.
Yeah. So that's significant because Sara is formerly an EMT, and she's also a self-made expert on chronic illnesses in today's topic. And as she was just telling me while the intro was going on, you also have some other credentials?
7 years working in the medical field as a volunteer and then as,
So,
a paid worker.
In other words, she knows what she's talking about, even though
Mostly.
I have no idea what I'm talking about most of the time. So that'll be good, especially for today's topic. And today, what we're going to be talking about, or what she's going to be telling us about, is parasomnia disorders, which is what's a parasomnia disorder?
That's just the heading for a group of sleep disorders. It's what you call any sleep disorder is a parasomnia.
Right. I just like that it says para at the beginning of it because it really fits in with her theme of paranormal activity and things like that. But I think it's really good to note that parasomnias go with...
They're very linked to especially household hauntings.
Or at least experiencing paranormal things. A lot of people that think they're experiencing paranormal things might be having a medically induced parasomnia disorder, but I think there's probably a lot of evidence out there that shows that, some of them are psychological, and then I guess you could also make the argument that some of it could actually be induced by actual paranormal activity. Maybe it's kind of linked. I know we'll probably talk about it later, but that one documentary we saw where it got
the one I hated.
But see, I actually liked it.
I liked it until the end.
Yeah, I was.
And what was the name of that one?
It's on Netflix.
The Nightmare.
The Nightmare, yeah.
It's about sleep paralysis.
I thought it was really good. It was really well put together. But before we get into anything serious, there's a new segment to the show that I want to introduce that I just thought of today, actually, while I was blowing off working today. Mainly because I was cruising around on YouTube and I was like, oh, that looks cool. But I finally saw, so the new segment's called Hey, Do You Want to See That? And it's where we're just going to look at horror movie previews for a minute and then, discuss whether or not we think that those are going to be good horror movies, I guess. I don't know why I'm doing this. But I found this one. And we're going to watch it because I thought it looked cool.
I've waited for him.
Testing 1, 2, 3. We're on.
We're here to investigate a patient that killed three innocent teenagers on a Halloween in 1978.
He said it backwards again.
He was shot by his own psychiatrist and taken into custody that night, and has spent the last 40 years in captivity. Hello, Michael. I have something you might like to see.
Is that Freddy Krueger?
Everyone in my family turns into a nutcase this time of year. Yeah, I mean, your grandmother is Laurie Strode. She was almost murdered.
Wasn't it her brother who murdered all those babysitters?
No, it was not her brother. That's something that people made up.
Do you know that I pray every night that he would escape?
What the hell did you do that for?
So I can kill him.
Dad, look out!
The bus crashed.
Mom, what bus crashed?
Michael escaped.
Excuse me, somebody's in here.
Hello?
waited for this night. He's waited for me. I've waited for him. Get out the room! Get inside! You don't believe in the boogeyman? He's here! Michael! You should.
Can you close the closet door?
Okay, can I just say I hate slasher movies?
It looks awesome. I want to see it.
I'll see it because I'll see literally any trash horror movie, but
I like the Halloween movies.
That's why I get it confused with Jason and Freddy, because they're all the same thing.
Okay, well, so I wish a new Nightmare on Elm Street was coming out, because that would fit in with parasomnia disorders. You know, murder slasher in your dreams.
I used to have Freddy dreams, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk parasomnia disorders. You kind of dumbed it down a little bit. It's basically a big heading of things that happen in your sleep, but that's kind of generalized, because from what I saw in your notes, it's like two main categories. It's not it kind of has to do with sleep, but it's not necessarily in your sleep.
Yeah, so you got your non-rapid eye movement parasomnias. The ones that happen before you're dreaming.
So that would be before your brain kicks in and starts making you go through your whole sleep cycle, having dreams, things like that. So it'd be as you're falling asleep, basically.
Yeah, and then you have the ones where you're in rapid eye movement. Those are your night terrors, your sleepwalking, stuff like that.
Okay. I think I have actually suffered from some, not chronically, but I think probably everybody has, like, experienced a parasomnia at some point in time to varying degrees, you know, even if it's not chronic, but I guess some people experience it chronically. I think I've done the sleep paralysis thing once or twice, like in my whole life. That's basically where you're laying there, you can't move. It's actually more than that. Like, and I know that's something that happens to you quite a bit. So can you explain it a little bit for people that
Sleep paralysis?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so
because that seems to be the most common one that comes up in the threads and everything. That's going to be what everybody wants to talk about, I'm sure.
I find it interesting that historically this was called hagging, where the person, usually a male, would be sleeping on their back and they would feel like a witch was sitting on their chest drawing out their life force, and they would wake up tired the next morning because they're experiencing a parasomnia and not getting the right amount of sleep. But my first experience with sleep paralysis was very vivid. I never had it before, and I was laying in bed. My son was just a baby, and Allie, Allie, she's not here today, but she was watching him and had fallen asleep with him on my bed. So I went and laid in my bed, and her back was to me, and all of a sudden it feels like I'm still awake. I'm being pulled out of bed by my feet, and I can actually see myself moving down in the bed. Can't help it. And I had sort of visions after that of weird stuff, and it was really weird. Like, I didn't know what sleep paralysis was at the time. I had no clue.
I would imagine that's really scary, like when you don't actually know what sleep paralysis is, because then it's just like out of the blue. And I think like the first time I had an experience like that, I had already heard about what it was. So like it was less scary at the time. One of the things I think is really weird about sleep paralysis is the consistency in which people kind of have similar experiences. Like the main one I notice, and I think this is the one that links it to
the shadow man.
Yeah, everybody sees either a shadow man, as specifically
with the hat,
one with wearing a hat. And I remember me and you had talked about some of your sleep paralysis episodes, and I never even thought to ask you that. And I said, why does everybody see a hat guy? And that's when you were like, I've seen him.
Yeah, after that first incident, and interestingly enough, that first incident was going on in that apartment I had after the exorcism deal with all the weird stuff going on. So I immediately, and that's when I was super religious and a big believer in the paranormal before I sort of had my falling out with all that. So I was absolutely sure it had to do with whatever was haunting that apartment.
A lot of people have they feel like the sleep paralysis is related to also, not just like supernatural paranormal things, but alien abductions too.
Oh yeah, that's a super common one because you can't move, and a lot of times you'll see more than one shadow figure. So it starts to look like you're surrounded in your bed by these people, and they're putting stuff in your eye, and you can't move, and it may feel like they're crushing you. You can't breathe, you can't scream. All you can do is look around, and it lasts about 30 seconds, but it feels like it's an hour.
Right, in real time it's only 30 seconds, but
because you're dreaming. It's a waking dream. But the shadow man started at our house we live in now, and I would be sleeping in bed and I would wake up and I would see him in the corner, and every time I blink he would get closer and closer and closer to me until he was almost to me. And by the time he got to me, I started focusing on just one finger and moving it, and I knew when I could move that it was broken, but I would still panic every time.
Yeah, Emilio says he actually had a sleep paralysis episode last week. It was his first one. It was terrifying. The shadow person was leaning over him as he frantically tries to wake up, and he's trying to wake his wife up to no avail.
Yeah, I've tried to scream for my husband a couple times, and I can't scream for him.
And a lot of the people, like a lot of our clients that we've talked to, that where we suspect it might be sleep paralysis, you know, they talk about, you know, it always happens alone at night, like when I'm going to bed or whatever. And that's always kind of the first place that our head goes to, because, well, like I said, I've had the 2 times it happened to me, which is enough, and it's happened to you so many times. We know how real it can feel, and maybe there is a real element to it. There's an argument to be said for it, because medical science hasn't quite pinned down exactly, like there's a lot of theories and ideas and some medications that they put out there that seem to help with it.
Yeah, I was reading a study where they were doing it on rats, and the problem is there's 2 different chemicals in your brain that make this happen. It's basically the opposite of sleepwalking. So when you're sleeping, your body sends out it's not 2 chemicals that make you not act out your dreams. It causes your muscles to not work. So if you're sleepwalking, this chemical isn't being produced properly. There's not enough of it. So you're having your night terrors where you lash out and you get hurt sometimes. Or when my son has it, it just comes out as this inarticulate, god-awful screaming. I thought he was on fire the first time. It was absolutely horrifying, and we couldn't wake him up. I finally ended up screaming in his face.
Was that back when he was screaming at the closet?
No, this was when he got that bunk bed. So he was about 2 the first time that happened. But there is a lot of myths about sleep paralysis. People told me that if I don't sleep on my back, I wouldn't get it. But I get it sleeping on my stomach. I
would think that would make it even worse, because if you really do open your eyes and like you're awake but you can't move, you're basically gonna feel like you're also suffocating at the same time.
Oh yeah, it feels like you're dying.
Yeah, I would think sleep paralysis on your back is moderate, as horrible as it is. In my head would be moderately better, because at least you can look around the room.
So sleep apnea, the thing is, you have to be in pretty deep sleep to suffer from sleep apnea. So yeah, I would think that waking up from an apneic episode, because it is so sudden, and my husband has sleep apnea.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, because it is so sudden when they wake up that I would think that could throw them into an episode of sleep paralysis, but I haven't actually looked up the science on that one.
Yeah, and like Kat says, you know, she doesn't think everybody with sleep apnea has that, which is true.
I don't have sleep apnea.
Yeah, I think it can be a trigger for it, you know, and what's a trigger for one person isn't always a trigger for somebody else. sort of thing.
The other thing is, if you suffer from the ones more common in kids are night terrors and sleepwalking. If you suffer from that as a kid, you're more likely to suffer from sleep paralysis as an adult because your body, like, it's reflexively dumping more of that chemical into your system.
Yeah, and to go back up, Terry asked, could it be caused from past trauma? And I think the answer to that, I mean, not being a professional in that area, my guess would be yes, because I would say that there could be a psychological element to like, if I know that the 2 episodes I had or any, and I actually have a couple of other parasomnias that are on the list, a lot of those triggers are my depression and my anxiety, which is it's chemical, but it's also psychological. And those will trigger certain things.
I would also say past trauma is going to trigger what you see during your episode.
Oh, yeah.
Because I have had sleep paralysis episodes where I have seen people from my past who terrified me, and they're in the place of the shadow man. So I would say it affects both whether you have parasomnias, because everyone knows, I mean, that's pretty common knowledge in the medical community that trauma causes anxiety, causes depression, causes parasomnia.
And see, one thing I've always wondered about, because it's really hard to there have not been, the research is kind of hard because there's actually not been a whole lot of third-party observations of sleep paralysis where they were doing a sleep study, and during the sleep study, somebody actually got to witness somebody having that episode.
Yeah.
Like, it's happened a few times.
Because my husband's witnessed me having it, because he was in the room when I had that one. The one time I thought, oh, if he could just bring me a pad and pencil, I can write down that I'm having a sleep paralysis episode. I don't know,
Right.
but he said it just looked like I was laying there awake.
Really? Okay, so which kind of got to my question. Like, I've always wondered is if sometimes sleep paralysis isn't actually just a dream of you being awake. Like, you're not actually sleep awake, like what we're talking about, but you have a dream that you woke up and then you wake up and everything's just so, like, because the body has a really good awareness of its surroundings, even when you're asleep.
The thing with my sleep paralysis has always been it's either when I'm waking up for the day or I'm going to sleep and I don't think I'm asleep yet. It rarely happens in the middle of the night, like when I wake up. But yeah, I've seen people have sleep paralysis episodes. My friend Jeremy had sleep, and I've walked in on him having episodes, and it just looks like he's laying there awake. It almost looks like a petit mal seizure. And that's something else I was going to add, is that a lot of people have epilepsy. They have seizure disorders. They don't know it. And it can appear as a parasomnia, or a parasomnia can appear as an epilepsy disorder. Right,
and like one of the things people don't realize, like some people will, the seizures aren't always just like spazzing around and all that.
No.
Sometimes it's just like zoning out.
When I was having,
which I do a lot. I've always wondered if I had if I was having
those are the petit mal.
Yeah,
because your grand mal seizure is your tonic-clonic seizure, the one where people are. And you remember when I was having the seizures, most of them were the tonic-clonic shaking around. But I'd also have these seizures where I would just blank out for a amount of time, and I'd wake up on the ground and I'd have no idea what happened.
Yeah, you're just missing time.
Yeah, it would just
you may as well have been abducted.
Disappear. Or I'd be talking to somebody and they'd say, "Hey, are you still talking?" Because I didn't realize what was going on until I went to the doctor. Even with my medical knowledge, I still had no clue. It was very confusing.
And that's one of the things that kind of pushes me away from, and still not totally ruling it out, but kind of pushes me away from jumping to the paranormal aspect of it. Because like the people that have like the petite seizures, or the or they have the sleep paralysis episodes, or some of the other types of episodes, and somebody else was there and like saw it happen. So we know aliens didn't abduct you. You didn't go anywhere like that, right? But then later on, during like we talked to Patrick last week, which he goes back and he does like the regressions and things like that. Well, some of those people that have those experiences will go back and think they were abducted during those moments of time where they're totally accounted for just not in their own mind.
Yeah,
which always kind of bugs me.
Emilio said, I think it's the brain making a mistake, not complete. That's exactly what it is. It's
Yes.
your brain not being able to transition into or out of REM sleep. It's some break in that mechanism.
Right. Well, there's two different parts of your brain that control like your waking functions and your sleeping functions.
Yeah.
And so it's supposed to, under normal circumstances, hand it off to the other part
It's
of the
supposed to
brain.
be seamless.
It's supposed to be seamless, and I think sometimes it's not.
Yeah, your neurotransmitters just aren't connecting. And that's in a way, like migraines are linked to epilepsy and parasomnias are linked to epilepsy because it's the same thing. It's your neurotransmitters not transmitting correctly.
Well, and since we're talking about like neurotransmitters and electrical activity in the brain and stuff too, we've done a lot of research on infrasound and EMF and like how it causes that paranoia. Well, EMF, the vehicle that it uses that it functions to make your brain do that sort of paranoia thing, what it's doing is it's interrupting the electrical signals in your brain. And so the other thing I think would be interesting is to see if high EMF levels actually trigger parasomnias, because parasomnias seem to become, well, especially sleep paralysis, it seems to be becoming more common. Or it might just be because
It's awareness.
It might just be because we're in the paranormal field, so we hear about it more often now, but it seems like it happens more often, and EMFs are higher than they've ever been because of, it's the electronic age.
But what you believe also greatly impacts your parasomnia. Like my mom, for example, is very, very religious. She believes that demons exist and they will F with you. When she came to me for us ghost hunting her house, she said she was having episodes of lying on her back and she sees these shadow people and they're deep. And some people are so caught up in that idea that they're not going to believe you when you say it's sleep paralysis. But
Right.
What was Emilio's question? We're not sure what counts, because the hag sighting and the shadow people and the alien abduction are the most common. We're not sure why that's linked. It's probably something to do with the chemicals and the like NDEs, like near-death experiences. Why are they all the same? It's because your brain reacts the same way when you die. Everyone's brain,
because the chemical composition is the same every time.
So I would have to assume either A, it is paranormal, or two, it's the way the chemicals are interacting, because I get the shadow people are what I see when I
I wonder if there's not, I wonder if that disorder is, or some of those disorders aren't a trigger that allow you to be more perceptive and you are actually seeing something that's paranormal going. Like that's the one thing I always bring up kind of in our research that drives me nuts about some of the other groups and things like that is it's always one or the other. Either the group goes in and they say there's nothing paranormal going on, you're nuts, blah blah blah, or they'll come in and they'll say, oh, it's definitely demons, there's no way you have depression or any of those things. And I've always gone in and we have always gone in and tried to evaluate every claim as an individual claim and see if there's a connection to them overall. But there's no reason you can't have bad pipes in your house and paranormal activity.
Or high EMFs and a ghost.
Right.
But
yeah.
Julie, I was telling them that my first, you get what are called hypnagogic. Is that the right one?
Hypnagogic.
Hallucinations. And that's the one that is also linked to being possessed, is where you feel like your bed or body is shaking. And I get that too, where I feel like I'm being ripped out of bed, but my body's still there. So I'm not sure if that's sleep paralysis. Can you move when it's going? If you can't move when it's going on, it's probably sleep paralysis.
Yeah, and I think sleep paralysis, like if you go look up the stats on sleep paralysis, it says like it affects like 10% of people. But
like 70% of people have had one.
Right, and so I think the numbers in the research is actually a little bit skewed a little bit.
Well, and I never reported it to my doctor. Why would I?
And I think people have experienced it and not realized that's what they've chalked it up to. Oh, it was just a bad dream, or and they don't really realize something's going on, or they think it's a paranormal experience.
Yeah. My first time I thought it was a paranormal thing,
which is totally natural. I mean, something totally crazy is happening.
It was fucking sorry. It was horrifying.
My friend's daughter had a couple of episodes where she'd woken up a bit and could move, but it was very hard. Instead of coming out of it, she crawls a bit and gets pulled right back to where she started. Feels like quite a bit of time has gone by.
Oh, it feels like forever has gone by.
Yeah, and that is
gosh.
exactly sleep. Like, sleep paralysis doesn't always 100% paralysis.
Sometimes I can move my feet.
Or sometimes a lot of people feel like they can do what's called astral projection, where they like leave their body or whatever, and so that sleep paralysis kind of falls under that circumstance too, because
I've had the one where I have seen like
get up out of your body or whatever, or you think you're into her specific story is it's almost like dreaming that you got up for work and you get ready for work and you get all the way there and then you wake up
and you're like, I've got to do this again.
So you didn't actually leave, but like you totally envisioned all that because you were laying there, and your brain works at such a fast pace. That's one of the reasons like those experiences like seem like they take forever, because your brain works in nanoseconds, where like your conscious brain works second to second. You know, in the real world takes so long to do certain actions, and like your brain can just process it like that.
Well,
so
that one episode I had over here where I was sleeping and I felt like you were holding. There was a monster in the bathroom, and you were holding me down and trying to make me look at this monster in the bathroom. But
you needed to look at it.
But I could also see you. So I knew it was sleep paralysis. It was still horrifying, but I could also see you. But it felt like it was 30 minutes of this going on, when in reality it was 10 seconds. It was pretty scary because there was something in that closet or the bathroom I couldn't see, but I didn't want to look at it. But there are some other parasomnia.
Yeah, that's like the most common one that gets talked about in the paranormal threads. But there are other parasomnias that kind of bounce into that.
I suffer from like 6. So I was a sleepwalker as a kid, and in times of stress, I'm still a sleepwalker.
I am a sleep eater. I will get up.
I've seen you do that.
I'll get up and especially if I have like a nightmare, I'll get up and I'll if it's available, I'll either make chocolate milk or I'll eat Oreos. And that's how you get to be a fat paranormal investigator.
Yeah, that's totally the whole reason.
It is. That's how I gained all my weight, was totally through sleep eating.
As a kid, I had sleepwalking and I had night terrors. And the night terrors and sleepwalking will both come back into play if I'm stressed out. Because when I was a teenager and my mom was in the hospital, I started sleepwalking again, and I also started having these night terrors that were so bad that I'd wake up with bruises, and at the time I thought my mom's house was haunted, so it played into that a lot. But later on I realized I was having night terrors, and I had this bed with these holes cut into it, and what was happening was I was getting my wrists or arms caught in this and then flailing around and waking up with crazy bruising just all over my body.
Right.
And actually, they've had kids brought into the hospital when I did rotations at Cook's where they thought it was a case of abuse because the kid would freak out at night and wake up bruised. And I looked up some stats on the genetics of parasomnias. If you have just one parent that suffered from sleepwalking, you're 3 times more likely to do it. And I would walk into my parents' room and stare at them like a creeper and scare the shit out of them.
Yeah, the total, what's that?
Paranormal Activity.
Yeah, Paranormal Activity.
And actually, my daughter got punched doing this one time because me and Allie had just seen Paranormal Activity, and Caitlin is also a sleepwalker. And that's when I started wondering, is this genetic? And she walked up to Allie, and Allie popped her. She didn't actually hurt her, but it was mean Allie.
I know, that's because Allie's a horrible person.
But then Andrew started having the night terrors, which was just god-awful terrifying. It is just this wordless screaming that won't stop.
See, I had night terrors as a kid, but it was mostly in the form of like, I had like 5 reoccurring nightmares that would just kind of like rotate through all the time, and I would just have them over and over and over, and then they never got less scary. And I don't necessarily think that's a parasomnia thing, but it was just weird because I would wake up in the middle of the night after having one of those nightmares, and then I'd walk around the house or whatever, but like you could talk to me and I wouldn't realize like you were talking to me. I was basically sleepwalking, but I was also awake. It was really weird.
Yeah, Steven has had entire conversations with me in the morning where he thinks I'm awake and I'm answering logically to questions, so he thinks I'm awake, but I am not.
Yeah, Emilio brings up a good one, which I think is another one that's on your list, opposite of paralysis, where motor function returns before.
Well, yeah, that's your
awake.
night terrors and sleepwalking. Is like I said, it's those two chemicals, and it's the reason science is having such a hard time suppressing this, because antidepressants will control one or the other of these chemicals, but not both. So, like we said earlier, one is you can't move at all, which is how you're supposed to be when you're asleep. You're not supposed to be able to act out your dreams. But for some reason, mostly in kids, this is way more common in kids, is this chemical isn't released properly.
Right, and it's probably because the brain's not done developing yet. Like it hasn't figured out how to regulate those things right off the bat quite yet.
Let's see, I looked up something else. It's just talking about the genetics of parasomnias and how common it is, and how the epidemiology behind this isn't well known. It's not totally understood by science. Your brain's a really confusing place.
Which is probably where the para part of parasomnia comes from, because it's still not understood.
Para is what they use to define.
No one likes you. I'm trying to make this paranormal.
Okay, paraphilias are
nasty.
I know, but they use it to describe a heading for a medical condition. It's a group.
You're no fun.
It's a grouping.
You ruin everything.
They're all paranormal. It's all paranormal. It's all ghosts.
I don't like you.
Okay, so a few other of these.
Well, the other thing I want to bring, we were also talking about why does everybody see the same shadow people or whatever. I wonder if that plays into the genetic memory theory that we were talking about a little while ago too. Maybe everybody that experiences it sees the same thing because there's something so awful that happened to our species with a man.
Genetic memory, yeah.
Yeah, so we all see the same boogeyman or a version of the same three boogeymen because aliens. It's ancient aliens.
Oh, yeah, Catherine, I've been told some really important things while I was sleep conversing. They think I'm awake, and I'm apparently answering logically, and then they don't believe that I was asleep. They think I was just ignoring
Because she's
them.
full of crap. She's done an entire investigation in her sleep, and then...
I did once drive to the hospital in my sleep.
I lived in a house in Fort Worth that was extremely active, had two people have the same dreams that demons were raping me, and they couldn't stop them. Mind you, these two people never met. One gets all shaken when we talk. Yeah, shared dream.
That's interesting because I had that house, my mom's house, the one we did the experiment in with high EMFs, where I had friends over who had never met and all had the same experiences in that house. The shadow man chasing them down the hall and girls would hear a baby crying. It almost seemed divided by gender of whoever I was having stay the night. Men would see shadow people, and girls would hear babies crying, and then they never come back. So,
and then, I think when people have shared experiences like that, where
it makes
it's
it
so
more
similar,
valid.
yeah, it makes it way more valid.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't want to attribute it to mass hysteria because I don't know each individual case. We investigate paranormal activity, so obviously we think things happen sometimes. But I also think that there's a percentage of that time where it's kind of a mass hysteria sort of thing, where people just share similar experiences because we have similar culture, similar regional things like that. It's just kind of a thing.
So exploding head syndrome is one of these. And I don't know why it's named that. It's basically, have you ever woken up to your name being screamed or a loud bang and there was nothing going on?
Yes. That is, and that happens frequently even now, but it's like you're just nodding off, you're getting it's almost like restless leg syndrome in your brain in my head, but
hey, it's Patrick.
You'll be starting to fall asleep, and then all of a sudden you'll just hear blam, but nothing actually slammed or anything. You can look all over for it.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Like being the half frozen thing where you're freaked out already, so it triggers, any scary thought you've ever had.
Oh yeah, I mean when you're in that half asleep state, like your amygdala is on high alert the entire time, because that's when your body's most vulnerable anyway. So it's your natural instinct to be on defense for any kind of strange sounds. Look, we already got people saying
For the exploding head syndrome,
and we didn't even know that was a thing.
I was gonna read what it actually says about it.
Yeah, go ahead and read the clinical definition, because it was really cool.
Alternately termed episodic cranial sensory shock is a benign condition in which a person experiences unreal noises that are loud and short, like a bomb exploding or a gunshot when falling asleep or waking up. These noises are often jarring and frightening for that person. Neither the cause nor the mechanism is known. Though harmless in and of themselves, episodes have been known to create distress or impairment in the lives of individuals. Because, it's horrifying. And my common one is hearing my name really loud in my ear.
Yeah, and that's happened to me a ton of times, where it just sounds... And not like something creepy.
So do they say Brad or Ashton?
They say Brad Ashton. And they say don't listen to that red... But yeah, like I'll just hear like Bradley. And I'm like, but it just sounds like somebody behind me, not like, ooh, it goes. And I'm just like, oh crap, what the hell is going on? Exploding head syndrome. I lived in a house in Austin, Texas. I woke up to it was loud as fuck.
Oh, girl scream. Yeah, that's...
Oh, yeah. Okay, I missed that part of it.
That sounds freaking horrifying, just as a side note.
Of course, it's Austin, so it could have actually been a woman screaming.
Yeah, after our last trip to Austin, just, we need to go 4 miles. It's going to take 30 minutes. The GPS is obviously wrong. Nope, it's... yeah.
I could totally see that.
Austin is a shithole.
It's really overrated. Mike was like, man, I really want to go down to Austin. I'm like, you're not missing much. It's mostly construction.
It's probably the best town in Texas, but that just says a lot about Texas. Ooh. Oh, baby crying. That's, when my kids were little, like when they were, that was a common one for me. I'd wake up to them crying and panic, and they'd just be sleeping soundly. What?
Baby crying, like, if I hear baby crying in this house, that's going to be really creepy. There's no babies.
I think sometimes that's a parent thing, because I'll wake up to that a lot and be so panicked something's wrong with one of my kids. Even though they're 12 and 7 now, hearing a baby crying just triggers something in my head that makes me just flat out panic.
I think people forget sometimes that senses are fallible. A lot of people will be dead set that they had something paranormal happen to them because they're like, I saw it with my own eyes, or I heard it with my own ears, or I actually felt it. And the thing is your senses are constantly lying to you, because all it's doing is interpreting data from your environment. And 90% of the time, it's actually filtering out things that it thinks you don't need to know. Like that.
It's like if you drive to work every day, eventually you don't remember your drive to work. Your brain marks that out.
And we talked about that a little bit last week too. It's kind of that hyper focus, but like it's even with the colors and things that you see every day, things don't look the way we.
I think it'd be scarier if you're not a parent. I think that's hearing a baby crying when you don't actually having a baby. That's way worse.
Especially after I buried that one in the backyard.
But I have a pop quiz for you.
Okay, let's go. I'm super smart.
This condition is when a person will engage in sexual acts while still asleep. A condition usually occupied by another sleep disorder. It can include such acts as, well, I don't want to read these off.
Necrophilia.
Masturbation, fondling themselves or others, having sex with another person.
For somebody that didn't want to read that, you just plowed right into it.
Because I thought it's interesting. In extreme cases, sexual assault.
Yeah, actually, they, I think they recently added that to that definition because there was a court case. And I can't.
There's been cases of like a husband having sex with a wife while she's asleep and he is also asleep. But how do you make sure that's actually what happened and he's not just full of shit?
I don't know. That would be dead baby in the backyard. You have no idea how many are back there.
We're definitely not killing people to make sure that stone tape theory is true. That's not happening.
That's actually part of a that is not the best excuse because it doesn't hold up in court very well.
Yeah, if that was going to be an excuse in court, I think they would have to undergo serious sleep study.
Oh yeah,
to prove.
But I know, and I can't think of this like the names that go with it. But I remember reading about specific cases. One was like a rape case, and one was a murder case. Somebody murdered somebody in their sleep, but they actually proved that they were asleep.
Yeah, there have been cases where people have killed people during episodes of night terrors because they're so panicked and terrified, and they're also cross it with sleepwalking, where they've killed people.
Yeah,
and I mean, how horrifying must that be to wake up and find your whole family dead and be like, well, I'm screwed and my family's all dead.
Woo, that was a totally horrible nightmare. What the fuck is going on?
But yeah, in cases of sexsomnia, and ironically, I've mostly heard of women with this condition, where this guy will call them up and be like, hey, you want to come over tonight for a booty call? And she's like, what are you talking about? I've never slept with you. And he's like, what do you mean? You were over here last week?
Yeah, you drove all the way over here last week and, you know.
But so that is a thing, which is kind of interesting that, yeah. But I don't know why it wouldn't be part of a parasomnia. I mean, if you have night terrors, if you sleepwalk, if you have sleep paralysis, if you have exploding head syndrome, well, why wouldn't sex be a factor?
Yeah, and those are all ones that fall under the rapid eye movement sort of thing. And then initially the sleep paralysis one happened. It typically happens outside of rapid eye movement.
Because the list of things that happen during the RM sleep behavior disorder are, that's when you wake up with your bruises, your lacerations, even fractures. It says here that demographically 90% of people with this are males, most older than 50 years.
And see, that's one of the big ones that we get. Like when we get the calls or the messages online, it's like I went to bed and I woke up with scratches on me, and I know I can't scratch myself, and I don't think people realize that is totally possible. You can hit yourself.
Your brain, when you're awake, and this is the reason zombies would be so strong, your body will prevent you from doing things that will harm you. Like if you're at the gym and you go for 300 pounds and you've only ever done 90, your brain won't let you do it. Like your body could actually do it, but it would tear all the muscles in your arms. It would damage you to an extreme.
You don't think I could bench 300 pounds?
No. But if you're asleep, your body doesn't have that mechanism to prevent self-harm. So you're going to be stronger than you'd be if you were awake. And that's why zombies would be able to, chew through people's skulls, because they don't have those self-limiters that, we have while we're awake. And it's the self-limiters that disappear. The old lady pulled the baby out of the car when it was crashed. It's those limiters that disappear when you're in high states of trauma and panic. When your body no longer cares that it's ripping itself apart to do something.
Yeah. I think there's also room to say that if you do have sleep disorders like that, it might leave the door open for actual paranormal stuff to happen, because you'd be more susceptible to it. Maybe like you're more open because you're kind of in that hypnotized kind of subconscious state. Especially
if it's demonic activity in the culture I was raised in. They can't really get to you unless you're out of it.
Well, and I think a lot of people also believe that, like, you can communicate with the dead through your dreams or whatever. Like a lot of people feel like relatives or whatever have come to them in a dream and talked to them. And it wasn't just a dream. It wasn't just a subconscious thing that happened. It was an actual thing that happened. And so if you have parasomnias and you actually believe that's a thing, then that would open the door for much darker things to actually come through, I would think.
Terry said, plus if you're going to self-harm, you'll probably lessen the blow on yourself. Yeah. So, trigger warning, because if you have ever self-harmed or attempted suicide, this is your chance to duck out for the next, a minute and a half. If someone is going to kill themselves and they're going to slit their wrist, and we've seen this in the hospital a lot, they have hesitation marks where they went to go do it and they just scrape themselves or they just cut themselves a little,
right? Because it usually takes a few tries.
Their body doesn't want to let them do it. Or when they're hanging themselves, they're not able to do it the first time. Your body, even if your brain wants to die, your body is going to try and prevent it. And that's when you get the hesitation marks when someone's going to try to kill themselves.
Right. So if they're doing it in their sleep or whatever, then you're
not limiting.
Yeah, you're not going to have that, and that sets up a lot of.
So trigger warning over. I just didn't want to.
But that sets up a lot of cases for, like you were saying, they go into the hospital and maybe a caseworker might think that they're being abused.
Yeah, we had a kid at Cook's come in and he had bruises all over. He was there for some other reason, and a caseworker did show up. Yeah. And they thought he was being abused. And the parents said, no, he has sleep. He has night terrors. And it was this whole big thing because the parents were panicking and they didn't know how to prove that this was something they weren't doing.
I think it would be especially bad with adults, especially with like a parasomnia, because if you don't remember it happening and like they're asking you about it, and be like, I don't remember how it happened. It sounds
like a lie.
Yeah, it gets.
I fell down the stairs.
It gets that much worse, and so it kind of makes me wonder if there are, and if so, how many cases there are where people basically
lost their kids because of a parasomnia.
Right.
But luckily, before doing that, generally they will do a sleep study. And because
I hope so now, at least.
Yeah, they do. They have to check all cases, and they have to follow up with them in the system. They have no choice, and it's a lot of times it's unfounded, but they've got to check.
I remember once when I was and this is before I ever. What's weird is like I never had a paranormal experience growing up. Until I had a paranormal experience, and then like at that moment you kind of go back in your head and like reevaluate things you didn't think about before.
Yeah.
And I can kind of remember one time, I was probably about 16, 17 years old, somewhere in there or whatever. And I remember I was like chilling in my room, and I had my head propped up and everything was fine. I wasn't tired or any. It was late at night. I wasn't tired, and I think my dad had company in the other room because I remember talking. But I remember I was just sitting, I was looking at the clock, and I was thinking about, hey, should I go do something, right? And I'm looking at the clock, and it's like, when you like watch it and it ticks by and it's like 1 minute later? Well, I watched it tick by, and then all of a sudden it was 4 hours later, and I was in the same position, and it was just totally crazy. And I remember I saw the clock, and I'm like, whoa, I just like in 1 second lost 4 hours. And it wigged me out, and like as I was sitting there, all of a sudden my elbow just like gave out from under me, and it felt like something pulled it. But I was just like, oh, I must have dozed off. And that was the end of it. And that's all I really wanted to think of it. But it makes me wonder if like I had like kind of one of those zone out parasomnia things happen, or if I literally just dozed off on my hand.
That's experience I told you about as a kid is the first time I ever saw a ghost. As I was laying on my back, I was 5, and I was laying on my back in my bed, and I was terrified to sleep in my room. I always was. And when you push your fingers over your eyes and you get the blue spots, I saw something that color coming out of my ceiling. And of course I booked it to my parents' room immediately. But now looking back, like you mentioned, I wonder if that wasn't sleep paralysis or something.
Or like early onset, like it doesn't all happen at once. I don't think you just wake up one day and all of a sudden have a whole bunch of sleep disorders. I think it happens a little bit here, a little bit there, and you write it off until it becomes like this bigger problem. Because even in that documentary we watched, the one story really got to me because the guy said, I never had any problems at all. And then my girlfriend started talking to me about sleep paralysis.
Talking about it can definitely set it off.
Right. And he's like, and we talked about it. I'd never heard of it. I thought it was interesting, didn't think anything of it. And then that night, he started having sleep paralysis. And it was like major. But like there was some crazy, granted, it's all personal experience. Like there wasn't a whole lot of medical data in there. But
that movie again was The Nightmare, and that's on Netflix if you want to watch that.
I thought it was really. We both thought it was really good, but Sarah didn't like the conclusions that it kind of came to.
Yeah, Terry, if you didn't hear, it's because I mumbled. It's The Nightmare, and it's on Netflix. I believe it's still on there, but yeah, it's about basically two people that are experiencing this.
I think it was 4. Okay, it was about 4 different.
I didn't like the conclusion they came to, but the rest of the documentary was really good and accurate on how it happens.
Yeah, I thought the experiences that they talked about it, but the one that really got to me was the one guy. He was talking about, and he was kind of in a like a triad sort of relationship or whatever, but he was laying there and he was going into a sleep paralysis episode. But what he saw above him was just this big, dark, like almost like a shadow man, but it was bigger and it had red eyes and it smelled like sulfur, like it was purely demonic or whatever. And he woke up from it, and that was like his millionth time to have that experience. And so he was just like, oh shit, that was crazy. But then he looked over at the person that was sleeping next to him on the bed, and she was looking at him horrified. And he's like, what? And she's like, I just had this weird fucking nightmare that you were like trapped, and I looked over at you and there was a black cat sitting on your chest holding you down, and it had red eyes and it smelled like sulfur. And he's like, what the, and like if somebody told me that, I would
jump to paranormal real fast.
As logical as I am, I would definitely say, oh my God, how the hell do you come to that? Now, the logical side of me, looking from the outside, would say he's discussed the process before and kind of planted that seed in her head. But the way he described it, I think it was a new person. I haven't watched it in a while, but I think it was somebody that didn't know anything about his disorder.
Yeah, I avoid talking about it sometimes because just talking about it can set off an episode. I'm not sure why.
Well, I also like the other guy that he was actually keeping his sleep paralysis at bay by turning on a TV with static. But then one TV wasn't enough, and he'd have to get another TV. And it's like he looked up like a year later, and he had like 15 or 16 TVs in his room, just all tuned to static. And he's like, okay. And then, that's a good thing, and you've experienced this too. A lot of people say, okay, like I have sleep paralysis, and I have, through meditation or medication or whatever, that they're able to keep the sleep paralysis from happening for a while. But then they'll come back, and once they do have an episode again, it's like hell. Like it's way worse than if they had just gone through it the whole time.
Yeah. Because there was 3 years between my first and my second episode, and I'm not sure what meds I was on then, because that's when I had that infection in my leg. So I was on a lot of different meds, and I wonder sometimes if they were playing a part in keeping this at bay. But when it happened again, it was like the first time. It was just as horrifying, and it was a different episode. Like I saw different things, I felt different things, so it scared me again, even though I knew what it was at that point. But knowing what it was didn't make it any better.
Yeah, I think parasomnia, especially the sleep paralysis thing, is just so weird because people have a shared sort of vision of what happens during it, and that's what causes so many people to jump to that it's definitely paranormal conclusion. Because we were talking about it on some boards today, and people were like, what do you think about like sleep paralysis disorders? Is it paranormal or is it psychological? And my answer on that board was actually it could be both of those, but it could also be biological too, because it can have we know it can have a lot to do with those chemicals in your brain.
It has everything to do with those. I mean, that's the only thing that causes it.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a case to say that it could be psychological too.
Well, yeah, but it still affects those I mean,
right.
It's biological and psychological, or it's biological and paranormal. And if I was going to say I believed in ghosts, let's pretend I believe in ghosts for 30 seconds. I'd have to say it could be both, or one or the other.
So, okay, so you've told us about parasomnias or whatever, so now I have to digest this as our tech, right? Because my main job is to say, okay, we have a theory about what some of this activity could be. Now we have to design experiments to figure out if that's right or wrong. So now I'm trying to decide what are some things that we could do as credible researchers where we could go in and separate out medical experiences from a legitimate paranormal experience that have the similar effects.
The EEG machine would be good for that because it can diagnose both epileptic disorders and sleep disorders, because your brain waves are going to be different if your brain waves are different if you're dreaming or if you're not. Dreaming causes theta waves. The other option you have is an fMRI, but we're never going to be able to get our hands on that.
Okay.
The other idea is just making them undergo more than one sleep study, because in one sleep study they might not exhibit this particular parasomnia.
Right. So it's gonna take multiple
especially because in a sleep study they put you in a different place. You're hooked up to all this shit. Steven described it as he can sleep during anything. I mean anything. And he couldn't go to sleep because he had so much crap attached to him. So you're in a different setting. So you're so much less likely to exhibit this parasomnia. It'd need to be almost an in-home over the course of a couple weeks sleep study.
So what we need to do is we need to get a credible medical professional that can observe the experiment and help us come up with a diagnosis. If we could get the EEG machine and then replicate the environment that they're having the problem, like it would be like a dark. If it always happens in a dark room while they're going to sleep, that's when we need to do it. Have them hooked up to the EEG machine. And monitor them remotely with cameras, environmental stuff, and see if anything in the environment causes these episodes, and see if there's anything external we can see while this episode's going on. And then with the EEG machine and blood pressure monitoring, and
they monitor all that. And
right.
Your breathing,
right. So we could monitor what's actually happening to the body at the time of the paranormal.
So there's one parasomnia that's not on this list that I'd really like to discuss because it's the worst one I suffer from. It is the absolute most life-altering parasomnia I have. Insomnia.
Oh, okay. I don't think insomnia
it's a parasomnia. It's a sleep disorder.
Okay.
So this is why I've never undergone a sleep study, because even in the perfect condition with 3 different sleep meds in my system, I cannot sleep. I was awake all night last night because I took all my sleep meds and I still could not sleep. I think my longest stint being awake without any, I wasn't on amphetamines, I was on no drugs, was 5 days.
And I think it's 4 days at the point where you start hallucinating.
It's about 2 at the point where you start, and you will hallucinate, and you will start micro napping while you're just doing anything, and you'll have crazy vivid dreams. I think this could also be linked to paranormal situations because it makes you so unable to think logically.
Oh, here's a good question. I bet everybody will want to know about all parasomnias, including insomnia. Can it harm you medically? Can it?
So there is a condition called fatal familial insomnia.
Okay.
It is very rare, and it strikes usually when someone's in their 20s or 30s. It's also genetic, where they just stop sleeping and they die.
How long does that take to kill you?
About 30 days.
So, well, I've always heard that insomnia can't kill you. Like you can't die from lack of sleep.
One case of, and this is a real disorder. You can look it up. It's fatal familial insomnia.
That's what that guy has on.
The Tales from the Gas Station is it's a creepypasta. It's a no sleep from Reddit, and I love those stories. And it's a hysterical story. It's on YouTube if you want to Google Tales from the Gas Station and list all of them. They're hysterical. But it's about this guy with fatal familial insomnia, and it's wrong in the way that he is awake for so long without dying. because it only takes about 30 days.
Well, I think part of the story is he actually is sleeping sometimes.
Sometimes, but
like when he's digging the hole.
They've also tried inducing these people into comas. The problem is, even if their body falls asleep, their brain doesn't.
Yeah, it's not restful sleep.
Your brain has to sleep to replenish. It has to. So yes, insomnia is medically harmful to you.
What about the other ones though, like sleep paralysis?
Sleep paralysis is not harmful. It's just terrifying. Night terrors are only harmful in the way that you can hurt yourself.
Right. So not the condition itself, but like
what
falling out of bed and breaking your neck.
Like sleepwalking is not harmful unless you try and drive your car and you drive into something. Sexsomnia, it could be harmful because you might catch an STD. Russian sleep study. Is that a creepypasta? Sorry, there's a creepypasta called the Russian sleep study.
The Russian sleep studies.
But yeah, insomnia probably is the only one that is directly harmful just from the condition.
So even if you're not experiencing, even if it is a parasomnia and not something paranormal, it's still probably something worth getting checked out. And
I'll check that out, Terry. Because that sounds interesting.
Russians do everything, like study, like they're the ones that actually do government studies on ESP.
But yeah, they've done studies on insomnia where basically one night without sleep is the equivalent of being over the legal limit while driving. And when I had been awake for 5 days, it was basically a walking nightmare. I wanted to sleep so bad I couldn't. I was miserable. I was throwing up. I had a headache because it will make you physically ill.
What are some of the things that actually... I know there's specific things that cause insomnia, which one of them is it iron deficiency? Potassium deficiency?
Potassium deficiency is something I found out I had that was causing me to... I was awake, but I had no memory. I lost like 4 days of my life with that. I posted a picture of myself on Facebook holding a bird I had caught in my house.
Which you're afraid of birds.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you are.
That's Allie.
Oh, yeah.
That's Allie. She's afraid of birds. But I lost just days of my life because I had this deficiency in electrolytes that I didn't know I had, because potassium's a main electrolyte your body needs. And so what was the question?
What things can cause insomnia?
Well, your big thing is going to be emotional distress. Is depression. So makes some people sleep. It makes some people stay awake.
And of course, there's also the opposite of insomnia, which is narcolepsy, where you just... And you can have both. You can be total...
Narcolepsy is very misunderstood. Narcolepsy, actually, one of the main hallmarks of narcolepsy is insomnia.
Right.
And cataplexy is what you see when a narcoleptic just collapses from something. That's called cataplexy, and it's totally separate from narcolepsy. I'm not sure why people... confuse the two, because it's actually only like 10% of narcoleptics that are affected by cataplexy.
I think you're so smart, don't you?
I'm pretty dumb, actually. But narcolepsy, yeah, the hallmark is insomnia. And the problem is these people can't sleep when they need to sleep. They can only sleep when they shouldn't be sleeping.
Right.
And they can't stay awake, so they'll feed them amphetamines to keep them awake.
What I thought was really funny is we were actually planning to do the Parasomnia episode a couple of weeks ago, but you couldn't do it.
Because I couldn't stay awake.
Because you couldn't stay awake because you couldn't sleep the night before. And I like, the irony was not lost on me at all. Because everybody's like, well, why did y'all cancel the Parasomnia episode? And I'm like, because of Parasomnia.
Yeah, when I have one of these weeks where I can't sleep, like I'm awake for 5 days, I'll have 2 or 3 days where I can't stay awake. It basically puts me in a comatose state.
Do you mind telling people what you take to go to sleep? Like what the doctor has you
The
on?
doctor has me on Restoril, which is a PAM, like nazepam, diazepam. It's a benzo. It's
right, which isn't necessarily designed for like.
Temazepam is actually the one that is designed for sleep. It's a longer acting. It's not ever used for anxiety because it's so strong.
Right. Okay.
I also take tizanidine, which is a muscle relaxer. And that's also for my bad hand because it clenches when I'm asleep if I don't take it.
Right, because pain will keep you from sleeping. Yeah.
Pain is also, I have really bad chronic pain. So another thing that keeps me from sleeping, and a lot of people from sleeping, is chronic pain. Bad sleep hygiene being on your phone late at night. A lot of phones have a blue filter now where you can cut down the amount of blue light. Use that because blue light will keep you awake. It's interesting how that's
Oh yeah, I did see something on that.
But I also take Finnegan. I take Klonopin, yeah, that. So I take 4 different sleep meds. I took 4 last night and could not sleep.
Yeah.
And I'm on the 30 milligram of Restoril, of temazepam. I started on the 15, but it didn't work. And none of these meds work in and of themselves. I have to take all 4.
And I just wanted her to talk about some of the medications, but this wasn't her first stop for this. Like,
no, I want you to keep in mind that I'm not recommending anybody take the cocktail of sleep meds I take. I have a tolerance built up. I started taking over-the-counter meds. Benadryl, diphenhydramine is the same thing that's in...
that diphenhydramine will put me to sleep, but it will give me very, very vivid
dreams.
nightmares.
That's actually a symptom of diphenhydramine.
Like huge.
But diphenhydramine is also what you'll find in your ZQuil. It's what you'll find in Nitol. It's basically every...
Yeah, if you guys are buying ZQuil, which is super expensive, and great if it actually helps you go to sleep, but you will save a ton of money if you just buy some generic Benadryl. Because it's the same active ingredient.
I was going to list some more sleep meds they tried on me. Seroquel. They tried me on the top dose of Seroquel.
Yeah, Terry said she was taking Seroquel.
Yeah. I tried Trazodone. Trazodone did not work. I tried
Trazodone, since you mentioned it, that is the main one that's the only drug that they will actually prescribe for sleep paralysis. You know, they still don't know all the triggers and all the things or whatever, but Trazodone specifically is one that the doctor will try, and it seems to have the best benefit. And I think it's interesting. You were on Trazodone for a while.
About 6 months before I decided it was bullshit.
Right. But during that time...
I didn't have any...
You didn't have any sleep paralysis episodes. I thought that was an interesting note.
Let's see. I've also tried Trazodone.
Oh, it looks like Terry is your spirit animal.
They've tried me on basically Ambien, Lunesta...
Ambien is some horrible shit.
Oh yeah, melatonin is something I take along with my other sleep meds. I take that too.
Now they're finding out you have to be, because people use...
You have to be low in melatonin for it to work.
Right. Well, and they're also finding out if you take too much melatonin, especially kids, because people were giving melatonin to their kids.
Yeah, I've used melatonin with Caitlin.
Yeah, they're finding out that you can get melatonin poisoning.
I'm sure
it's causing, I can't remember what the symptoms are, but they were finding this like common symptom.
Yeah.
And it was actually like pretty bad. So you should definitely not take too much melatonin.
You mentioned marijuana. So as I've mentioned, I have chronic pain, and before I started seeing a pain doctor and taking opiates for that, I tried marijuana in a bunch of different forms. I tried edibles. I tried smoking it. I tried with the vape pen. I tried the tincture. I tried everything. For me, marijuana causes anxiety, rapid heart rate, and vomiting. And they've done this study on the West Coast where it's legalized, where all these people had this similar symptoms. Apparently, some people are just intolerant to marijuana.
Right, which is, it's great, and I want to see it legalized and used more, because it definitely helps a good portion of people, like maybe a majority even.
Yeah.
But there is a subset of people
I just wish people would stop thinking it's a magical cure-all, because it did not help my pain either.
Right. And we've also tried
Kratom,
which kind of helped.
It kind of helped me get drowsy, but it wouldn't help me sleep. I had to use it in conjunction with...
What's really funny is I took the Kratom just for recreation to see what it would do. Did nothing to me, and I know a lot of people swear by it, and so I really expected to at least get like some kind of buzz or whatever, and it was nothing. But the funny thing is the times I tried marijuana, like cannabis, way back, nothing ever. I never really got, like, my eyes got red, but I never got like high or anything ever.
So we've had a few questions. Oh, me too. Yeah, I've been a total rep for the pharmaceutical company. I've tried 8 different antidepressants that were supposed to help me sleep and help my OCD. They've had me on a billion different opiates, most of them so expensive I couldn't afford them, so I had to go back to the basics.
Paranoia is a huge side effect. It makes me puke and my heart race.
Yeah.
And see, like I said, it's never really got me high. But what I have noticed about cannabinoids is, and even the kratom to an extent, while it didn't like give me that kind of high, that buzz, it did. There's not a big enough sample of data because I wasn't necessarily taking it during a panic attack.
Calmed your anxiety.
But I was more mellow. Like I didn't seem to really give a shit as much. Not like, hey man, you know, like I wasn't walking around like Shaggy, but I was very even keel about everything.
The problem with marijuana in Texas is that it's still not legal, so I can't pick what kind to try. It is possible that there is a strain of marijuana that would help me, but until it's legal here, I can't use it because I see a pain doctor and they drug test me every month.
And he's specifically mentioning
the CBD
oil, which is legal in Texas, but you have to have a prescription. And it's only for seizures. It's the only way you can get it. It has to specifically be for epilepsy.
And for the pain doctor, if I test positive on any drug they or my other doctor hasn't prescribed, or if I test negative for any of the opiates they prescribe, I get red flagged and I can never see a pain doctor or get treatment for my chronic pain disease ever. And I have complex regional pain syndrome. It's listed as like the most painful. I would argue that it's not the most painful chronic pain disease, but that's how it's listed.
I would say it is. I think it's not for you because you're more able to mentally manage your pain, one, and B, you have it in a very isolated area.
It's a very progressive disease. It started in my hand. Right now it affects everything from the shoulder down on this side, but it is only in one spot. And it's a pain disease that's so severe that people have actually cut off their own limbs to get rid of it. They have done home amputations.
And then it sadly...
It's phantom limb syndrome. It's the same. We should do a podcast on that because it's interesting. But doctors have actually prescribed amputation for...
And it's sad that it doesn't. That's what gives me like.
It has worked for some people if they have it only in a finger and they amputate up to the elbow.
Well,
it has helped.
You said there's two kinds of CRPS and it typically
there's type 1 and type 2.
Okay, explain what it is.
So type 1 is idiopathic.
It's CRP awareness on our show.
Complex regional pain syndrome. It used to be RSD, reflex sympathetic dystrophy. It was found out in the Civil War when people would get an injury and the brain would never stop reacting like the injury was still there. So my hand was crushed in 2012. A weight fell on it and it got so swollen I got something called compartment disease. If you can see, I have scars from where they did fasciotomy on my hand. And then I was in traction for 3 days. But CRPS is basically your brain is saying you're still injured. It's sending all these pain signals. So even if they amputate the limb, then you end up with phantom limb syndrome.
Right, because the pain...
It's the same reaction.
Because basically the limb or what... It's not the limb being damaged that hurts. Your brain is just still getting that signal from the nerves. Yeah. So removing the limb... sometimes won't do anything because the brain, it's in the brain.
The brain still thinks it's there.
So the only thing that would actually maybe work is a lobotomy. But that actually brings up a good point. I wonder if there's some kind of we've talked about like some people do the ketamine.
Yeah, where it resets your brain. They put you in a 5-day coma. But I wanted to recently they have done this thing. The CDC and DEA have decided that no matter what you have, if you have pancreatic cancer, if you have what I have, you are only allowed 90 milligrams of morphine equivalent a day. And all pain doctors have to go by this. My pain doctor has a dude that was crushed by a train. He's on the equivalent of 500 MMEs a day. He has to be down to 90 by next month. So they're cutting my pain medications by 3/4 next month. Doesn't matter if you're in pain. This is going to drive people into suicide or the black market.
And this is straight out of your doctor's mouth, actually.
Yes,
this is what he said.
He said it's going to drive people to suicide and the black market, and already a woman has killed herself. She has what I had. She had CRPS in her spine, and she left a note basically saying, "Fuck you, DEA, you killed me."
And Kat brings up a good point. I mean, we talked about it last week with Patrick, is like, you know, with this sort of thing that's going on, people are going to have to start looking to
medical alternatives.
Whether they're real, whether they're snake water or not.
It's snake oil.
Snake oil. What? You think you're so smart with your certifications and all that crap, all right?
But it is going to drive people into alternative medicine. And I did a study at UTA, a 2-week pain study, where they used biofeedback, hypnotism, they used meditation and exercise and PT. It was a non-opiate program.
And they shot corn husks at you.
That was PT for my hand after my surgery.
Oh, okay.
That was the first round of PT I did. And it was an interesting study because it didn't cure my pain, but it gave me a lot of ways to manage right. to deal with the mental aspects and to kind of escape that pain.
Well, at least bring it down from a 9 to a 7.
Yeah.
Right.
It is helpful. These other things, and hypnotism might be something that would be pretty helpful if it puts you into that meditative state. If they can teach you how to do that, you can I kind of in my head wall off the area, like mentally put a wall there so I don't snake
you bitch.
So I don't feel the pain. Morphine just doesn't work. Oh, are they lowering the dosages in Canada too? It's such BS.
But the good thing about Canada is they just legalized marijuana just like nationwide.
It's just so frustrating because it's not right. They're killing people with this, and I do understand that doctors have overprescribed opiates. I do understand that the black market and addiction is a huge factor.
It is. It's a huge problem, but we're I think it's not that we're just addressing the problem incorrectly. We're fixing the wrong part of it. It's like getting a flat tire and saying, "Oh, it's because the lug nuts are fucked up."
And we treat addiction in this country in such an awful way. And I was an addict. I 12 years clean from a drug of choice. And if I tell a doctor that, I can't get any medication.
Right, which isn't fair because it's such a racket too, because you have a legitimate disease, you legitimately have pain. Like it's not you can't fake CRPS
or RA. I've tested positive for RA and fibromyalgia.
You need pain management
and gastroparesis.
And so, like, some of the only options that are available, mainstream options that are available through medicine, are opiates. They throw opiates at you, and then they get you on them, and then they say, "Oh, but we got an opiate problem," and it's that's not your fault.
And my pain doctor did the right thing. He started me on the lowest dose possible.
Right.
And he did alternative treatments. They did shots through my neck into my spine. They did all these other things to try and help me. They didn't just jump to opiates, but some doctors do, and they are the ones that have ruined it for everyone.
Amelia's asking about what's in the background. Those are I hate pops, first off, but that is a misspent childhood.
Those are all his action figures he plays with.
I do not.
He doesn't take them out of the package. That would wreck their value. God, you're such a freaking nerd.
Oh, God, I hate you.
Sometimes I bring my children over here, and I have him take the things out of the packages, lick them, and then put them back.
I hate you right now. Sorry.
Me too, 12 years sober. Are you my sister? Maybe.
Do what?
Oh, Terry. My mom was adopted. We could be related.
Oh.
But yeah, you can't tell them you're an addict because they won't treat. And I have a friend that died
because they'll do the opposite of help you. They'll be like, "Oh, well, then they treat you like a criminal."
I have a friend who died in the hospital a few months ago. She had an infection in her arm, and they removed all her skin from her arm. The pictures are insane. You can see every part of the inside of her arm, and she is a heroin addict. I did not know she was still using because I was sending her money on occasion. And if I'd known she was using it to buy heroin, I would not have been sending it. But she went into the hospital with this infection, and they refused to give her any pain meds. She got the hospital advocate involved. They refused to give her any pain meds. She was there for 4 days with no pain control after the surgery.
No skin on her arm.
And she was in a lot of pain, and she was in withdrawal. And the same day, she had someone bring her in some heroin. They gave her Dilaudid, and she was too scared to tell them, and she overdosed. And while she was also complicit in this death, I don't think it was the hospital's fault. I think it was their fault that they would not treat her.
Well, I hate to say this, but there's a lot that goes around there. Like, it's while she shouldn't use and sneak in meds and stuff like that, but we're at a point where it's like, what choice are we leaving certain people? The thing is we want to lump everybody together. We want to do laws and either everybody's an addict or they're not or whatever. But I think every case episode.
So I was saying I worked my mom was the charge nurse at John Peter Smith Hospital in Fort Worth. It's a super hardcore hospital if you know the area. It's not in the best neighborhood. We had a lot of what you would call pain-seeking or med-seeking people. The problem is a lot of those people are also sick. But it makes you so damn jaded working there because people come in and waste your time and they want narcotics while there's people that are freaking dying in the next room. And it's so hard to separate out, and I don't blame the hospital. When I go and they bullshit me, and they do it a lot. They have sent me home puking blood. They've sent me home with compartment syndrome.
And you've got so many chronic illnesses anyway. Like
I'm a frequent flyer.
You're a frequent flyer. I mean, and it's not your fault, but
and the frequent flyer, frequent flyer is what you call someone who repeatedly comes to the hospital for bullshit reasons. And the problem is, even though my reasons aren't BS, I have been labeled a frequent flyer, so I can't get care. Which, on the hand of being someone who's worked in the medical profession, working on an ambulance or working in the ER, even as just a volunteer, I understand why, but it doesn't help me to be treated like that. In fact, it's almost killed me quite a few times. Yeah. But anyway, Parasomnias.
Yeah, we kind of it was in the same realm. We're talking about medical reasons for things. And chronic pain actually ties into that too, because it
causes insomnia for one, and it can also reactivate childhood sleep disorders.
And the thing is I'm glad you brought up insomnia, because insomnia particular will cause all the other ones. Like insomnia can be a root cause for every other. I'm surprised it wasn't on the
it's also
the workup we pulled.
It's also the most common parasomnia.
Right. And people gloss over it too, because there's no one that's watched this episode so far that hasn't had a bout of insomnia. And the pendulum swings both ways. If you have insomnia one night, the next you're gonna doze off halfway through the day the next day. And that's best case scenario, actually.
And the other problem is doctors don't believe me when I tell them I've stayed up 5 days straight with this. Yes, I've had micro naps, but I have not had sleep. And it's so physically, I get sicker and sicker, and my pain gets worse and worse, and it's just this cycle that never stops.
And it's definitely a thing. I mean, that's what the book Fight Club is about. I mean, the main character has, insomnia. It's like, it's a book about the most extreme case of insomnia ever. And, he goes and blows up banks and starts a freaking cult while he's asleep,
The other thing is that if I had to pick one disease to get rid of, it wouldn't be the CRPS or the fibro or the RA. It would be the insomnia, because it makes everything so much worse.
Well, and I mean, and how much of your life are you missing, because you can't stay awake during the times that you would want to stay awake? I mean,
and I can't function because I haven't slept. I can't think. I'm paranoid. I feel sick.
And I bet if you've got decent sleep, you could deal with mentally. You can deal with the pain better.
You can.
When you're more well rested, you can deal with your life better, and you can evaluate things for what they are and be objective and things like that.
I've noticed with my opiate, like with the Percocet, I take way more when I'm having a bout of insomnia. And that, too, is a bad cycle, because Percocet gives me insomnia. I can't take it within 6 hours of going to sleep. I have to take an alternate med to deal with my pain. So insomnia is just impossible to fight for me. They've never prescribed me any single med that has worked for me. I've always had to be on 4 or 5.
All right. So we need to kind of wrap up, but so parasomnia is this like huge umbrella, and the reason we're talking about it on our paranormal podcast is because there's so many experiences that people have that are very seemingly paranormal, but they actually have a very valid, proven medical explanation for them that a lot of people don't want to accept because it just, for whatever reason, it just sounds far-fetched, or people don't want to let go of certain inclinations.
I want to throw epilepsy in there too. Okay, I don't feel like we owe a whole episode to epilepsy, but I think epilepsy plays a part in paranormal sightings and stuff like that.
And it takes so many different. I think what the problem is like parasomnia is this big like umbrella, like kind of all-inclusive title, and so is epilepsy actually, because there's different types of seizures and stuff. And so when somebody has a paranormal experience and you say, oh, it's a sleep disorder, or it could possibly be that you're having seizures or whatever, they get this specific image of what you're talking about in their head, and they're like, no, that doesn't fit. It's not a medical thing. I was definitely there. I definitely experienced this. And they don't realize that there are subtleties to it, where you can be having a seizure while you're just sitting there in the chair chilling, and you're totally aware of everything that's going on, and it just sounds like somebody walking around your house. That could be a seizure.
Yeah.
Or it could be that you were just laying in bed and all of a sudden you feel like a weight on your chest, and even though it's a very, very physical experience, it is in your head. And I think people don't want to admit that because it sounds like you're calling them crazy, and it's not psychological, it's biological.
The other thing is auras, seizure auras and migraine auras.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you suffer from migraines, you might get an aura. And I know a lot of people, I'm sure a bunch of people that are talking to us right now suffer from migraines. You might get blurry vision, you might get abdominal pain, nausea. Seizures come with an aura. And one time, Steven was helping me wash my hair in the sink because I was having such a bad pain day. I was so sick I couldn't do it. And I heard something talking to me out of the drain. And I immediately flashed to freaking it. And I freaked out.
You want a balloon?
But it came to me later that when I was having a seizure aura, I heard voices. So I knew if I heard voices, I took Xanax, and it would stop it.
And people don't want to say that, because if they say they're hearing voices, like automatically where your brain goes is, oh, they're schizophrenic, or they're just a nutbag, or they're talking to angels. It can be, and I don't think people realize that there are biological explanations for things that could seem psychological. And I think that has to do with the fact that, it's only in the past 25 years that that's actually come to the forefront of the conversation, where medicine is actually figuring that out. And I'm not saying that in a way that we're discounting any paranormal experience anybody has that's similar to that.
This could be paranormal.
It could absolutely be paranormal, but it does answer the question about our methods in how we do things, because it's very hard to go in and prove something is paranormal. But what we can do as educated people is we can evaluate the things that we know about. We can check, and we can do a sleep study, and we can figure out if you're having parasomnias.
Yeah.
We can do...
But that still doesn't rule out that it's... We're not saying that...
It doesn't rule it out.
We're not saying that.
But it gives you somewhere to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if we find that there's a parasomnia, or that they are having seizures, that biological trigger, that means you can medicate for it. You can do different things to adapt to it.
Because
and then if that solves the problem,
then we don't need it.
Then we can rule out, okay, that probably wasn't paranormal, and their quality of life is improved, which is always the ultimate goal anyway. Yeah. If it doesn't fix it, and we go through the whole list of things we can try, and we keep studying it, and we're ruling out there is still something external, then at that point, that's when we can look and decide if there is something paranormal.
And just
out
for the
there.
record, I haven't heard any voices since I started on a regular over-the-clock seizure med, and they pulled that thing out of my back that was causing the seizures.
Oh yeah, okay. So very just quick note. So she was having the main. Just to go back to that, voices and stuff like that is sometimes biological, not psychological. You had the neural stimulator in your
so
back.
like I said, CRPS causes electrical stimulation where it shouldn't be. So they put cords in my spine.
And just to go further to the point that like opiates weren't her first stop for everything too. Like you were looking for other methods to control pain.
So they put a battery in my back, and they put these cords in my spine. And the first time I had a seizure was the morning after that, but I didn't know what it was. I thought I was just cold and having a shivering fit, but it lasted for a while. And so what it was repeated tonic-clonic seizures, and it was so painful and miserable. And come to find out that I had lost a bunch of weight too after that surgery, because that's when I got the gastroparesis. That made it so much worse because it shifted. I lost 120 pounds, and it shifted the battery and the cords in my spine. And the more it shifted, the more I had these seizures. That's when I started losing time. That's when I started hearing voices. So they put me on a seizure med until they could pull that thing out of my back. And sure enough, as soon as they pulled it out, everything stopped. But the cords went all the way up to the base of my brain. So I have to assume that's what was causing it. But unfortunately, Medtronic does not have that labeled as one of the side effects. So
It definitely should.
I can't prove it.
Yeah. It might not actually be a side effect of the device, but of a shoddy surgeon, didn't connect the ground wire.
I really like that doctor, though, so I hate to see anything bad about him. And he was so startled when that machine didn't help me. But, yeah, it was interesting that something like that can cause... Just one little thing going on wrong in your body can cause everything.
Kat brings up a good point that I don't want to discredit her. Right? I have a counterpoint to it, which says, the only time she wouldn't use it as an explanation is if corresponding bruises are not the same size of your own hand yet.
Well, I can show you some bruising where...
Yeah, your INR is an 8 right now.
I'm on blood thinners, and a normal INR's about 2, and mine's through the roof. It's so high that the testing can't measure it, so they took me off the blood thinners for the blood clot I had in February. The thing is, though, I'm bruising so easy if Steven just grabs my arm, but the bruises don't come across as his hand size, because the way you bruise is it's broken blood vessels under your skin, so it can spread and look like almost anything. But yeah, I would...
And even in a normal person, like there have been lots of forensic studies and stuff where they've... and we did it on your arm a couple of weeks ago, where I hit it in varying degree, to get it. And of course, it came out like you would think it would with ours. But there have been studies where they've done that, and of course, it comes out totally different because of the patterns that happened underneath the skin.
Allie bruises so easily. When she was working at Goodwill, they asked her to start wearing long sleeve shirts because it looked like she was being abused.
Right.
But if that was happening to me, Kat, I think I would, with the technology now, I think I would video myself sleeping and see what's going on. Mm-hmm. I think I would set up a camera in my room and videotape that. Yeah. That way you can rule out if it's yourself. But of course, then you might see something horrifying, and then you just didn't want to know. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you're at the point that you're calling us anyway, you're already at the point where you want to know anyway. Yeah. But I mean, the big point I'm trying to get across is not necessarily that it has to be one thing or another. It's just there's a bigger world, whichever camp you fall into. Like if you think everything's a sleep disorder, there's a bigger world out there. Yeah. That there could be something else going on, because there are things that still aren't proven. But if you're in the camp where everything's paranormal, there's a bigger world out there. There are things that can happen in your body that just, they really seem like they can't, but they can.
I often find the best way in life with everything is to hear both extreme sides and meet in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we approach everything. And it's...
whether it's politics, medicine, or the paranormal.
In just to go back, the way what I really love about being in this group and what y'all have let me do, y'all, man, I am the most Texan person in the room now.
What y'all?
Yeah, what you guys let me do in this group, like, is as far as being the lead investigator, is we work backwards from the other groups, because every other group goes in and they want to prove paranormal, and we work backwards. We work through scientific method, and you guys allow me to do that, and I really appreciate it, because we go in and we rule out everything that it isn't, because those are things that we can prove. We can get a definite answer on that, and I prefer the definite answer where it comes to an open-ended I don't know, as opposed to, oh yeah, we recorded some voices, so it's definitely ghosts.
Yeah.
I feel like it makes us look that's the big problem with paranormal investigation right now, is no one can be taken seriously, because the really popular groups are just going out and making these wild ass claims that they really can't back up. So it's not credible.
Yeah.
And we are busting our ass every single investigation to do the most credible work that we absolutely can. And it doesn't yield a whole lot of paranormal evidence.
Results, yeah.
But it really jazzes me that people have been enthusiastic about the way we do it, because they're like,
yeah.
Especially with like the mono wavelength thing. I got after Tyler, I got a lot of really good comments. They're like, man, the putting a filter over the flash to debunk orbs, why didn't everybody think of that? And that was kind of what the whole presentation was like. Hey, why didn't everybody think of this? This is, seems like common sense.
Before we wrap up, Amelia, I'm going to talk to my doctor about that. The problem is I've been seeing the physician's assistant, because if I do test positive on a drug test, that's a bad deal. So I will be I will ask my doctor about that for sure, because I would like to try it.
The CBD.
And Patrick, thank you. I'm doing pretty good now, but I appreciate it.
It's a day-to-day thing, and Sarah's definitely a trooper. I mean, even with everything she's got going on, she's still, has time to be a paranormal investigator and
best hobby ever.
Do these talks, and you're the best.
Oh, thank you.
And a bitch.
I hate you.
All right, guys. Everybody have a good night. Hope y'all got something out of this. See you guys. I should mention that Saturday we will be live streaming around 2:00. I will be giving a lecture at
Arlington. Yeah,
Arlington, UTA. And then there will actually be a Q&A panel for that presentation. If you're local to Arlington, North Texas area, and you can make it out, it's absolutely free. You can Google it, Arlington. I'll post a link in the
and
comments.
There's lots of cosplayers and stuff, so it's fun, and it's great that it's free, because A-Con is so freaking expensive.
Yeah, and of course we'll also have a table there. We'll be selling and signing copies of the books and talking with any guests that want to come up, and we'll actually have some equipment up there, so you can kind of check out some of the equipment that we use to do some of our experiments, things like that.
And I'm working on an NDE, a near-death experience episode of this podcast, because someone asked for it. So
oh yeah, I think
we'll be doing that.
We should interview your mom.
Oh yeah, because my mom was dead for about 4 minutes one time.
Mm-hmm. And so her experience, when, I don't want to spoil it for the episode, but it was really surprising when you told me she said, considering how religious she actually is.
But yeah, so we'll work on that. So we'll have that coming out.
All right, guys. Well, everybody have a good night, and we will catch you guys Saturday.
Thanks everyone for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did and you would like to know more about NTParanormal and our research, please visit us at www.ntparanormal.com or our Facebook page at facebook.com/NTParanormal. You can also check out our book, After Dark Paranormal Investigations, True Cases of the NTParanormal Team on Amazon.com, or find our articles in Paranormal Hauntings Magazine. Before we go, we would also like to thank our supporters at Paranormal Hauntings Magazine, Paranormal Investigations Equipment, PIE, Ghost House Paranormal, the Granbury Paranormal Expo, and the Tyler Paranormal Conference. Until next time, everyone stay safe out there and stay open-minded.